Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of The Deep Cut here on the Outlaw Nation channel. Can't thank you enough for downloading this or clicking on the view to watch this thing, because I am incredibly excited to welcome to the show someone that I've admired for quite some time, whose work has been in my life since the 80s. That's right, since the 80s. My God. And what an incredible turn of events to be able to interview him today. As you can see, right down there on this side, still getting used to camera and all that jazz. There it is. Greg Nicotero is going to be on the show with me to talk about so many things. You see the Walking Dead stuff right behind me. And you guys know, those of you who are fans of mine at Collider, you know that I hosted the Walking Dead recap show for quite some time. So I'm a massive fan of the Walking Dead and a massive fan of Greg Nicotero and all his work. We'll get into a lot of things today. He is here to talk about his work on Creepshow. It is coming out on digital and on demand for people to own, and on Blu-ray for people to own, season 1 of The Return of Creepshow. I saw both of these movies, Creepshow and Creepshow 2, in the theaters, and I had such a great time. So when I heard that Greg Nicotero was going to be the showrunner and executive producer for these things, I couldn't have been more excited. And let's get into a little bit of him before we bring him on the show. He is a showrunner, a director, a writer, a producer, a makeup effects designer, and supervisor. And of course, he's an uncredited actor on numerous projects. And speaking of projects, he has worked on so many various things, from The Walking Dead, as I just mentioned, to the recent Watchmen HBO series, to The Hateful Eight and numerous other Quentin Tarantino movies, to The Gray, one of my personal favorites, HBO's The Pacific, the Final Destination films, Milk, yes, the Sean Penn film, Grindhouse, the Transformers, Deadwood series, Sin City, Austin Powers, Army of Darkness, and two of my personal favorites, Bride of Reanimator and From Beyond. And as I said, he's here to talk about Creepshow Season 1, becoming available on digital HD and DVD and Blu-ray on May 19th, 2020. So let's bring him on to the show now. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Greg Nicotero. How are you, man?
Hey. How are you, John?
Good. I'm excited to talk to you, as you can tell from the intro. What's going on? You're self-isolating, you're self-quarantining. Like, what are you filling your days with now? Let's get to the actual thing that's going on in our lives.
Well, fortunately, I will say I had a script to finish for season 2 of Creepshow.
Okay.
And do some polishes on some other stories. We were literally 24 hours away from beginning to film season 2 of Creepshow.
Oh,
wow. When this giant pause button was pushed. It's like Monty Python giant finger that just pushes the pause button for all of us. So I wrote a script, and honestly, I went to my office the other day and printed out about 8 movie scripts that I've received in the last 2 months. My goal is to read a different movie every day.
Wow.
To try to find out, if I don't have enough shit on my plate, to try to put more shit on my plate. So
yeah, this is an interesting question. The interesting question you bring up, because I mean, you directed. You had a small project that you directed, like a short, and then you kind of moved into directing The Walking Dead. And you had done special, obviously, you were makeup effects supervisor, legendary, all this kind of stuff going on behind the scenes. But directing was something you had not tackled full force until The Walking Dead. And you directed so many of the legendary episodes of The Walking Dead. And now you directed, a couple of the episodes here for Creepshow Season 1. And is this reading of scripts now, is this an interest of yours to maybe move further into the feature film side of things with a horror, or what do you explore? Are you going to do the Carpenter route and do like a drama or some kind of like a Ricky and the Flames or whatever the Meryl Streep movie is? What are you looking for that?
That's right, Wes Craven. Yeah,
Wes Craven, exactly.
It's interesting because I never even really thought that I was going to fall into this world. I love creature effects and makeup effects, and I still get excited about reading the script and reading about this cool monster and trying to imagine in my head what it looks like and how we're going to build it. I had done second unit, like insert photography for Robert Rodriguez. I'd shot stuff for George Romero on Land of the Dead. So I had done some kind of insert units and gore units and things like that. When I directed this little short, it was just an idea I had years and years ago about like, wow, what if there was like an agency in Los Angeles that represented monsters and that monsters were real. And that if you were shooting Creature from the Black Lagoon, you'd call this monster agency and they would send the monster over with a bunch of handlers and you'd film it. And then when you were done filming it, they'd wrangle it and they'd take it away. I think I originally wanted to shoot it. I thought it would be like a funny gag, like when you're waiting in line at Universal Studios. I thought, oh, that'd be really neat. So I had this really like 2.5, 3 year run of like Inglourious Bastards, Book of Eli, Piranha, and Predators, like back to back to back. I went from like Berlin to Arizona to Hawaii to Texas. I was working my ass off. And in the meantime, we designed some busts for Frank to sell The Walking Dead because, they'd taken it to HBO, they'd taken it to NBC, a couple of places.
Right.
So technically, I was sort of on Walking Dead even before Walking Dead was sold to anybody.
Right.
So I finished Predators in Austin in January, and I knew we were going to start prepping The Walking Dead in March. And I thought, you know what? If this is the perfect time period to make this little movie. Shop wasn't very busy. We were gearing up for a bunch of stuff.
Right.
So we were able to use the resources of the shop and make Frankenstein and make the Wolfman and Creature. And it was really it was so much fun. And, I think we spent 40 grand making it. Like we didn't spend any money because we didn't have any money. We were building walls in the shop. And as soon as I was done shooting one scene, we'd take the wall and we'd put wallpaper on it and move it around.
Right.
So it was just fun. And, cut to prepping for season 2 of Walking Dead. There were a few instances on season 1 when I had called Frank and I said, listen, dude, if you give me a camera in about 3 or 4 hours and a bunch of zombies, I'll pick up all the gore stuff. Like I'll shoot the close-up of Rooker's hand on the roof. I'll shoot. So because I had directed second unit on The Mist with Frank, he was very confident. So I remember in episode 4 of The Walking Dead, when the zombies attack the camp, I had stayed late one night with like 4 camera guys and a couple zombies, and I just shot montage stuff of zombies tearing people apart and eating. And I remember about 3 weeks later, Frank called me at like Saturday morning at like 7 a.m. and said, please tell me you have more footage. It's so good, and I've gone through all of it. I need more. And I said, Frank, I only shot for 3 hours. Like what you have that's it.
You're right.
So before season 2 started, he said, okay, I think you're ready. I think you're ready to direct an episode. And
wow.
I hadn't really even, I'll be honest, I hadn't thought about it or even said, oh, I really want to direct an episode, because I kind of didn't want to be that guy. I just wanted, as a filmmaker, I wanted to experience as many scenarios as I could. And, directing was one of them that I thought, I just want to try it once. I want to at least go to my grave knowing that I had that opportunity and tried it.
Right.
So the first episode I ever directed on Walking Dead was the episode called Judge, Jury, and Executioner, written by Angela Kang.
Right.
And it was when Jeff DeMunn was killed. And it was really interesting because Frank had originally said to me, do you want a zombie heavy episode or a zombie light episode? And I'm like, that's a trick question. I know it. And I said, Frank, I know how to shoot the makeup effects and I know how to shoot the gags. Give me a zombie light episode. Give me one with lots of drama. And I read the script for that episode. And then I was like, I watched Miller's Crossing and I watched 12 Angry Men. I watched all these movies that sort of played into the theme of a bunch of people sitting around a tribunal, sort of judging whether this guy Randall should live or die.
Right.
And it was an amazing experience. Like I really was, I think Andy Lincoln later, I had told him I was scared shitless and that I was terrified. I was like, I didn't want to fail. I was like, I was so grateful to Frank for giving me the opportunity. I would show up on set with like my little schematics where all the cameras were going to be. And the camera guys thought I was adorable. They're like, look at your little charts. You're so cute. And we shot it at angles. And later, you know, I would watch other directors come and they didn't have those little charts and stuff. And I remember being kind of like excited that I had thought about the shots that were important to me ahead of time and I had seen it. I mean, I spent my whole career visualizing things that a director wants.
That's the thing that's been interesting as I've done research for you for this interview, Greg, and we only have an hour for you. I could talk with you for like 10, 20 hours about so much of your experience, but you're a Pittsburgh boy. You're a blue collar boy. Like it's not your instinct to be like, hey, give me the spotlight now. Like you just said, you didn't want to be that guy about like going and asking and doing it. Like you wanted it to kind of happen as it happens in conversation or organically. You took the step to go, I'll shoot the second unit stuff. You didn't go, I want to shoot a whole episode. You're like, I'm going to shoot the second unit stuff. That's what I enjoy doing. And then from there, the doors kind of open for you. And even when you talk about Creepshow, I've read that they were just randomly pitching something and you had read a book and you had been excited about it. And you went to the person who had written a story in that book and he happened to be an executive at Shudder. So it all just kind of worked itself out. It wasn't you necessarily hunting it down going like, you know, I need a spotlight for myself. It was more like, I would love to do this. And the fact that you still get overwhelmed by these kinds of things, I think it speaks volumes to the way you approach it with such respect, you know?
You know, I'm so grateful for you to say that because I think a lot of people don't really understand how fortunate I have been, number one, and how I had to navigate my path in the industry. You know, my grandfather was a truck driver. My grandfather drove trucks in Pittsburgh. My dad, you know, they were an immigrant family from Italy. So I really had to work for it. I had to find a way to turn something that I loved and I was so passionate about. I had to find a way to navigate that into a career that, by the way, I didn't even think existed when I was 13, 14 years old, reading monster magazines and painting models. It never even occurred to me that I could follow that as a career. It wasn't until I met George Romero. And then when I became friends with him and I would visit when they were shooting Creepshow, the original Creepshow. And I met Tom and I would hang out in Tom's lab while he was building things, you know.
That's Tom Savini he's referencing for people who may not know.
So, and I guess, I think sometimes a lot of people just assume that it was easy for me to do this, that, oh, well, you know, for me, so much of it was following my instincts and being at the right place at the right time and making choices. You know, I mean, I had a chance to work on either Evil Dead 2 or Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. And I chose Evil Dead 2. And the interesting thing about that choice for me was that led to the creation of K&B because both Howard Berger and Bob Kurtzman worked on that movie. So that was the first time the three of us had sort of bonded together and said, wait a minute, you know, this is something that we could probably do because each of us brings another aspect of filmmaking to the table. But, so I'm really happy to hear you say that because it really comes, Creepshow for me, it comes such from a place of my heart. You know, I felt very nervous and intimidated when we first started season 1 because I knew that there were a lot of people that were going to be looking at it. You know, I had already kind of taken some of what George's philosophies were when we started The Walking Dead. You know, George was the guy who invented the modern zombie movie. Before that, zombies were Haitian voodoo. George was the guy that went, no, you got to shoot them in the head and they're ghouls and they come back from the grave. So George invented this whole subgenre.
And not just that, also added the social element to it all to make it, to have meaning. And Walking Dead is full of that. It's full of it. The exploration of, because the zombies almost become any entity, could be any impending doom.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah. Anything. And it's a matter of how you adjust to it. That's what, when I hosted the recap show for many years at it was one of the biggest joys of my life, because this side of Game of Thrones, there are no more rabid fans than Walking Dead fans. And breaking every episode down and analyzing it, understanding it, and also finding the joy within certain episodes. That's the thing that I enjoy about your work more than anything else from the beginning, is you get involved with these projects and there's a tongue in cheek, or there's a smirk to them without losing the stakes of what's going on. And I love that, because there's a funness that comes from it. And I'll tell you, when you were announced to be in charge of Creepshow, I was excited and then I was skeptical, because I loved Creepshow, and I'm not a big horror fan. Like I didn't buy the magazines or have Fangoria or anything like that, but I know good horror when I see it. And Creepshow was so much fun, and because it was horror that was accessible, but also playful and creepy. And you talked about these things you were trying to grab a hold of, these elements. How important was it for you to be clear about that before you started? And then what were the battles you might have had with the executives who are maybe, a couple generations younger than you, to get them to get on board and understand what you were going for?
Question. I think my original hopes and my original intention for Creepshow was I needed to preserve the idea that you were reading a comic book, like that there were multiple stories. There was a couple discussions from some executives of like, we should just do a 1 hour anthology and we could just spend the entire episode with one story. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want it to be that I don't want that format. And my original thinking was I wanted actually 3 stories per episode, because I was using like the Night Gallery as reference. Night Gallery.
Oh yeah.
Sterling. Sometimes they would have an episode that was 2 minutes or 6 minutes, or so. My original dream was to have 3 stories per segment, and ultimately the realization of our budget. This was a pretty significantly low budget based on anything else that I had worked on. And so it became apparent immediately that we weren't going to be able to do 3 stories, because you'd have to shoot each one of them in like 2 1/4 or 2 1/3 days. There was just no way.
Right.
I can't even fathom how like Roger Corman would shoot movies in 5 days. Like I really, especially knowing that we were going to have effects and we were going to have, I wanted the stories to feel, I didn't want them to feel like, oh, we're just in one room. I wanted them to feel fleshed out. So we got into and agreed to do 2 stories per segment. And for me, the most important thing was I wanted the stories to all be different. I wanted, in this day and age where people get their content in small little increments, little appetizers, I love the idea that people have short attention span. That's just there's so much going on in the world right now that it's challenging to find people to commit unless you have to stay in your house, and then you can binge watch 25 episodes of something.
Right.
But that was interesting to me. And going after the stories, going after the writers, Mick Garris had done this a couple years ago when he had done Masters of Horror.
Right.
And I thought that Mick was on to something really interesting, because I like the idea that he was looking at the best writers and the best directors and sort of partnering them together. So you had Joe Lansdale and you had Dave Scow, and you had a lot of great writers, and then you'd have Dario Argento, and you would have George Romero and Mick, of course, and Don Coscarelli, all these guys.
Yeah.
I always loved that idea. So for me, the idea of being able to do Creepshow where they can be a little bit different. One can be a little funnier, one can be a little scarier. You wouldn't know this from looking at my credits, but I'm actually kind of a funny guy, and I love
I would
comedy.
say so, yeah.
I love comedy. So I kind of, at one point, I was like sitting down with Andy Lincoln and Norman Reedus one day, and we were talking about what movies we would remake, comedies. And we started talking about Midnight Run.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a great movie.
Yep.
But I realized that even at one point, I think we were joking around about shooting. This was this crazy idea I had. I wanted to shoot promos for The Walking Dead, but recreate scenes from classic horror movies. Like I wanted to do a scene.
Brilliant.
I wanted to do a scene where Daryl and Rick go into Reagan's bedroom from The Exorcist, and we would rebuild the scene. And this was like 6 years ago, probably.
Yeah.
I wanted to do like the Shining hallway, and I wanted to like recreate these different famous moments, because I could just imagine seeing Daryl walking up to Reagan's bed with his breath, and he's got his crossbow. And then we would do a double makeup on a Linda Blair lookalike and just have them talk. I pitched that idea to the network, and I said, God, it would be so much fun to do something like this. So then at one point, I think Andy and Norman and Stephen Yun and Lauren Cohan and I wanted to rebuild the set from Seinfeld and actually reshoot one of the Seinfeld scripts where each of them would play a part. I don't know why.
That would be genius. That would have been genius.
So everybody was fighting over who would be Kramer.
Of course.
But God, sorry, I got off track a little bit. But
no, I like it.
Bottom line is it all comes from a place of love, and with Creepshow, I was so lucky to be born, number one, into a family that loved movies. My mom and dad loved movies. They took me to the theater. And I saw Planet of the Apes in the theater. Yeah. I saw like all the, Irwin Allen disaster movies. When Jaws came out, my parents would go on a Friday night, and then on Saturday they would take my brothers and I. So they have to see the movie first. So my parents would see a movie. So Jaws, of course, which is the movie that kind of redirected, because originally I loved miniatures and models, and I was like, oh, I want to build like models and miniatures and spaceships, like 2001. And this was before Star Wars had come out. Then I saw Jaws, and then I went, wait a minute, I want to build like big mechanical puppets and things. And then, of course, I saw Dawn of the Dead, and that was it. And fortunately for me, in my career, I've been able to do all of those things. I've been able to. Matter of fact, I think I did all of them on Creepshow season 1. We had makeup effects. We had miniatures that we used for Tom Savini's episode that Joe Hill wrote. Right. And we had these big animatronic creatures and puppets and things. So all of those sort of highlights in my youth kind of directed me one way or another. Little would I know that the guy who directed Dawn of the Dead lived 30 minutes away from me.
Wow. What a thing to discover. Wow. Well, the other thing that's so great about this on Creepshow season 1, I want to bring up the cast you accumulated for this. For me personally, as I said, as a fan of 80s horror and the underground 80s horror like Reanimator and From Beyond and Chud and all those great ones that you would catch like on VHS and rent and, scurry home and not tell your parents you have it and watch it secretly, to have Adrienne Barbeau involved in this, Jeffrey Combs involved in this. That was such a great thing to see. And then Savini, to bring him essentially out of director retirement and have him direct an episode, must have been so much fun to have those energies on the set. And I think I read in the New York Times piece on you that Adrienne Barbeau said that she felt like you were directing like George Romero directed, and that really put a chill up her spine. How gratifying was the process of bringing all these people into this?
That particular moment, we shot all of Adrienne's stuff in one day. She had 12 pages of dialogue. Yeah. And we shot it. At one point, she turned to me and she was like, do you guys shoot this fast all the time? And I'm like, kind of, yeah. But at one point, I was giving her a note about something, and I said, yeah, try it this way. And she said, God, you sounded like George right there. And I said, wow. What do you mean? And she said, oh, well, on Creepshow 1, he kept telling me to go bigger and bigger and bigger when she was doing all of her stuff with Hal Holbrook. Come on, Henry, what are you?
Yeah, right.
And then she kept saying, "Really? Are you sure?" And so when I had gone up to her, I had given her a note that must have been something similar to something that George had said. And she kind of stopped in her tracks and looked at me and went, "God, you just sounded like George there." And it for probably 10 seconds, like everything froze around me.
Yeah.
And I looked and I saw Tobin Bell and I saw Giancarlo Esposito. And I was looking around going, holy shit, like, this is really, like, I'm really in the room with these amazing actors and these amazing people, and they've committed to be here with me to sort of keep the spirit of Creepshow alive. So
yeah,
that was it was astonishing for me to be able to work with all those guys, and then people that I hadn't met before, like Trisha.
Right.
I had never met Trisha before.
Trisha Helfer. Yeah, right.
Yeah. And same with DJ Qualls. At one point, DJ he had pulled me aside on set because we shot The Finger in record 3.5 days for that episode, with all the puppet work and all of the dialogue of him talking to the camera and the voiceover and all that stuff. Just crazy. And when we were getting ready to wrap him, and I was going on to Gray Matter, he had said, "Man, he said, the energy and the creativity that you bring to the set," he said, "it really gives me renewed faith in the business." Yeah. And I'm like, what? Really? He goes, "Yeah, you love it. You're passionate about it." And I said, "Listen, I learned a long, long time ago, when you have an actor in your makeup chair in the morning, you say good morning, you establish trust, you establish a rapport, you transform them into this character, whether it's Mickey Rourke as Marv in Sin City, then they go to set, they act, and then they come back into the trailer at the end of the day and you clean the makeup off and you send them away." So you realize that your bond with the actor as a makeup artist is probably the first person and the last person that they see every single day. So if you don't know how to create that rapport with your actors and have them trust you, then there's no reason to do it. And I remember when we did season 1 of Walking Dead, our makeup effect trailer was here, and then the makeup trailer was across the way. So as the actors would go in and get made up and step out, zombies would be stepping out, and they'd be like, and they'd stop. And Sarah Callies would be like, "Jesus, what is going on in there? Like, this is horrible." She had nightmares. She had zombie nightmares all through season 1.
Why wouldn't she?
And I think that was one of the reasons why the transition into directing for me really went so seamlessly, because I had every single actor on the show that trusted me, that knew that I knew the world, because they had seen Frank put all of his trust into me.
Right.
So that was a pretty magnificent moment, because you always hear stories about shows where the directors and the actors butt heads or this or that, and you realize that if there isn't that synergy and that connection, and that synergy and that connection is part of what makes The Walking Dead great. That ensemble cast that Frank put together from the beginning, it was like dropping a match on 500 tons of gunpowder. So he did such a great job of casting that show, of creating those characters.
I certainly want to talk about Walking Dead, but I want to ask you about The Finger. That is my favorite one, man, of this. It really is, because once again, it combines that old school 80s horror creature thing of it coming back to it's like the monkey's paw in reverse, where it's doing something positive for you as opposed to something negative. Well, you could argue positive, and it's getting rid of these distractions or these irritants in his life. But as it was going along, I thought the symbolism of it was brilliant as well. This idea that it's in essence his his id or his super ego, like stepping out and doing these things to remove himself, and then he ends up where he ends up. And I don't want to spoil too much, but he ends up where he ends up, and you're just like, I wanted another 40 minutes with this story, and you got so much out of DJ Qualls, and I'm so glad he pulled you aside to say that, because Qualls is one of these kids who blew up a little bit. You know, he did Hustle and Flow and a couple other projects, and you thought he could, like find a niche somewhere, even a Steve Buscemi type of niche in Hollywood. He hasn't quite gotten there, but if you watch this episode, this 20 minutes of DJ Qualls, it's some of the best acting you're ever going to see from him. I
couldn't agree more. He put every ounce of heart and soul into it. You know, the funny thing about The Finger is it was written by David J. Scow, who's a very, very good friend of mine. I've known Dave for years, you know, back when it was like the splatter punk movement was big.
Yeah.
And it was like John Skipp and Craig Spector and like all those kind of like rough and tumble writers. So that was the first story that we read when we were looking for material for Creepshow. And I sent it to the network and I said, not only do I love this story, I want to direct this story. There's no doubt about it in my mind that this story speaks to me. And, you know, it's a challenging story to tell because it's very untraditional. And DJ, you know, Clark's character, he's like this weird guy who just sort of talks and rambles. He really loves, in some ways, hearing the sound of his own voice. So he talks and he talks and he talks.
Yeah.
And there were a few instances where I'd gotten a couple notes from a few people saying like, well, you know, we're not really sure about this episode. We're not really sure about, you know, like that Clark's character comes out of the gate so strong already that we're having a hard time sort of identifying with him.
What?
And it kind of boggled my mind a little bit.
Right.
So I stepped back from it and I looked at the cut, and then I called the editor one night and I said, hey, I have an idea. What if we take that little moment in the center of the episode where he hears the noise in the garage and he grabs the gun and he goes to the garage and opens the freezer? What if we put that at the beginning? Like, it's almost like we're giving the audience an opportunity to go on this little journey with him so they can identify more with him. And then when he starts into his sort of incessant, you know, talking about, you know, purveyor of found objects and all that stuff, you don't think he's quite such a nutcase.
Right.
And it was just one of those things that I was like laying in bed in the middle of the night and thought about that and went, maybe what we need to do is get to that point where the audience is going to identify with how quirky of a guy he is.
Yeah.
And DJ just did such a good job. And I had a really good time. And, you know, aside from, you know, we didn't do any visual effects. The wide shots of Bob were stop motion. I hired a stop motion animator named Jim Davison to animate it because I wanted it to have that vibe and that feel. All we did visual effects wise, we removed some rods out of Bob's elbows and you know, just gave him character and personality and made him quirky and fun. And I was so proud of it. Plus listen, you know, I've directed 36 episodes of The Walking Dead. Yeah. To have the opportunity to direct those two episodes, the Finger and Gray Matter, really gave me an opportunity to show what I have to say and what I have to do.
And the story of Gray Matter is what Stephen King wrote that, and then. Am I correct on this? His son also wrote one of the episodes too. Is that correct? Or am I mistaken? Joe Hill, right?
Joe Hill wrote by the Silver Waters of Lake Champlain, which is, I think, in I'm not sure which book. It's not Full Throttle. It's in one of, it might be in Joe's Full Throttle book. But I felt like I had an obligation not only to reach out to Steve, but also to Joe Hill. I like the idea that I was sort of bookending the series with an episode by Stephen King in the first episode, and an episode by Joe Hill in the last episode.
Right.
That made me really happy. And the funny thing is that I knew Steve through George, and then of course all the Darabont movies, The Mist, and The Green Mile, and so I'd worked with Steve a lot, and I reached out to him and just said, "Listen, it wouldn't be Creepshow without you. I'd love to get a story." Yeah. Within an hour, he wrote back going, "I got the perfect story." And and ironically, he gave me the rights to a story called Survivor Type, which is about a guy who's stranded on a desert island the size of a parking lot and is forced to eat himself slowly and slowly.
Damn!
And I read it and I went, okay, I have no idea how to do this. So I wrote the script for it.
Yeah.
And that was going to be sort of our big signature episode. And as soon as we started production on Creepshow, and I realized that we weren't going to be able to go on I think somebody had said, well, we shoot it on a lake. And I said, you can't shoot it on a lake. If we shoot it on a lake, then we got to erase all the trees. And if we build a set in the parking lot and we put rocks and sand on it, I said, there's no real practical way for us to shoot that episode, given the budget restrictions. So I thought about some of the other material that I had read of Steve's, and then I remembered Gray Matter. Yeah. And Gray Matter is much more suited to Creepshow in my taste, because it's really a codependent story about an alcoholic and his son. And, so I reached out to Steve and said, I hope this is okay with you, but, budgetarily, we're just not going to be able to do, Survivor Type. So we'd love to swap it for Gray Matter. And he was like, great. So I know. I was so grateful to that because, you never know. I don't want to ask for favors. I'm not, even when I was texting my friends and saying, hey, I just did it. It's so funny. I'm so delicate with my friends in terms of asking for anything. For season 2, I sent a script to an actor friend of mine. Said, hey, what do you think? Would you be interested in reading something for me? And she wrote back, Nicotero, of course it's you. I'd read anything for you. I'd love to. And then she read it, and then she wrote me back. She's like, oh, I love it. It's great. And then we made her an offer to star in it.
Yeah.
And she texted me and she said, well, you didn't tell me you wanted me to be in it. I thought you just wanted my opinion. And I was like, oh, I went back and looked at the text. Like, I feel even weird putting that out there because I don't want to intrude on people. I don't want to, even last year when I was getting going, I talked to all I talked to Aaron Paul, and I talked to Simon Pegg and Josh Brolin and Elijah Wood and all the guys. I'm like, hey guys, I'm doing Creepshow and it's only a 3-day shoot if you're ever interested in coming down. And that's ultimately how I got a lot of people. Yeah. And the funny thing about, you mentioned Jeff Combs earlier, was I wrote him and said, hey, what do you think about, you want to do a cameo in Creepshow? And he went, yeah, it sounds great. Dude, I'm in. I said, you want to read it? No, I get it. Just, sure, I'll do it. So he agreed to do it. We sent him the script. About, I don't know, a week or so later, he flies to Atlanta. He goes to sit in his costume fitting, comes into my office, sits down and says, I'm going to have to teach you the definition of the word cameo. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, well, no, this is like a supporting role. This is like
this is a character.
And I went, well, yeah, but I guess I downplayed it. Not because I was downplaying what I wanted him to do, but I was downplaying it because I always felt a little like self-conscious about asking my friends to do something.
Right.
I don't know why. It's just a weird thing that I have. And I was grateful that Tobin agreed to do it and Adrian agreed to do it and David Arquette and Dana Gould. Dana Gould was another
Dana Gould of all people, man.
I went to the network and I was like, guys, Dana Gould is Henry in Skin Crawlers. There's not even a second choice. He's so perfect for the role. And when he came down and started working in it, and I mean, Dana and I have been friends for a billion years, and he just went through being a showrunner on Stand Against Evil. So I would call him and vent and go, I don't know how you did it. This is the hardest job in the world. And to have no money and have the hardest job in the world makes it 500 times harder. Plus, I have this tendency to want to do everything because I have that history of like, designing the makeup and going on set and executing. So I was like designing the comic book covers. I would do a sketch and I would send it off to my illustrators, and I was designing the comic book transition pages. And I bit off so much that for a long time during season 1 of Creepshow, I didn't even know if I was going to make it through.
Wow.
It was that hard. And when we started finishing episodes, I'd never read one review because I couldn't bring myself to be disappointed.
Right.
If I had read something that people didn't like. I think I made the mistake of clicking on one review and they were like, boy, the CGI in Bob was really terrible in the finger. And I was like, it wasn't even CGI. It was something, whatever.
Right. Well, some of these reviews, man.
Well,
I mean, I'm just saying, I haven't been in the industry. I know where some people are coming from who are knowledgeable and some people who aren't because they got assigned to do it because nobody else wanted to do it. And those are the worst when you get that.
It was very interesting for me. So I vowed to myself that when we did season 2, I was going to take a deep breath and take some very good advice that Michael Cudlitz gives me every time I talk to him, which is, don't forget to have fun, dude. We do this because we love it.
Yep.
And if you don't love it, don't do it. So if I would get stressed out and I would think about Michael and I would be like, I love it. He really, Cudlitz is he's turning out to be a pretty damn good director in his own right. So we started prepping season 2. We got all the scripts in order. We have all the directors. We started casting. We were 24 hours away from shooting day 1.
Right.
And we got put on hold. So
is there anything you can tease for season 2? Is there anything you can let me have or let us have who are watching and listening to you about season 2?
Yeah, sure. I went to a lot of the same writers from season 1. I have a story from David Scow. We have a story from Joe Hill.
Nice.
And in terms of directors, one of the people that I have been friends with for a long time that I always wanted to work with was Joe Lynch.
Oh, nice.
So Joe's going to direct. Joe's going to direct an episode, and we have. I'm trying to think of what else I can leave you with.
Andrew Lincoln.
I think that's good. I think it's good for me.
Is that good?
Okay. I wrote one of the scripts. We're doing one story as a 2-parter, which was something I'd thought about.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Because I said I liked the idea of doing a 18 to 20 minute thing and then continuing it in the next issue.
Right.
So that is based on a story by Joe Conrath that I wrote the script for. And John Esposito's back as writer. He wrote Night of Paul last year. He wrote an unbelievable episode called Model Kid. Takes place in the 70s about a kid who lives in this world of monster models and basically they're like sort of his friends, and he's under the care of his uncle who's not such a nice guy, so he might order away for a special monster model because of some of his problems.
Oh, I like that. Okay. All right. I'm looking did Joe Hill's really, really dark story that he sent you not make it into season 2 still? Is it still too dark for you to do?
No, it wasn't. Honestly, it wasn't too dark.
Okay.
But Joe's a very, very busy guy. He's got a lot going on, between Lock and Key and Nosferatu, and I love the guy. I mean, damn, he's so prolific. And he wrote me at the beginning of season 2, and he said, "Listen, I want to write that script, but I just don't think I'm gonna have time to write it by the time that you need it. So I think let's try to save it. If we do a season 3, let's try to save it for season 3." But it was on our list.
Okay.
And it's fun, I mean, getting a chance to talk to directors and writers and develop the stories. That's really, there's so much fun in that, because you get a pitch, and a pitch is like 2 or 3 sentences. And then you get on the phone with the writers and you're like, "Hey, what if it went here?" and expand it to a page. And then they'll give you like, a 3-page outline, and then they do the script. And I think one of the most interesting things for me is, because I'm so knowledgeable in the genre, and I've pretty much seen every horror movie that's been made since 1970, I can say, "Oh, this is kind of similar to that movie, so let's put a little twist on it here." And Paul Dini and Stephen Langford, who wrote Skin Crawlers, wrote a script for us called The Right Snuff, which is an alien movie, an alien episode. And we collaborated a lot on the script, and it's really fun to read the pitch and then go and see what the final script looks like, and kind of be like, see the evolution of it. And listen, to me, the nicest compliment is, most of the writers that I worked with last year were like, "Hey, dude, I just finished a spec script, and it would be great for you. Do you want to read it if you're ever interested in doing a movie?" Wow. So this week, I went to my office on Monday and printed out 10 movie scripts. And this week, I've been reading feature scripts that were written by some of our Creepshow writers.
That's awesome.
I know, it's really cool.
And I'm sure, like you just said earlier in the podcast or in the show, you said that you love that you're still learning, right? It's still a process for you. And here you are. And this is the first time you've show run something. And it is like, it's almost, and I'm not saying in terms of the quality, I'm saying in terms of the style, it's almost like this like college style that you're running and gunning and you're guerrilla filmmaking, and it's 3 days and boom, you don't get to take a crap or take a piss. You got to stay on set and do everything. Then afterwards, you can let it all out afterwards. But this is what we're doing. Did you pick as this experience as a showrunner, and then having these conversations with writers and directors, does this inspire you even more, that there's like a whole world for you to explore again? And let me do a subset to that question. Are you ready to let go of other things and not be wanting to do everything as you move into this world? Are you ready for that challenge?
Well, yes. And it's interesting, very interesting observation, because I have 2 other shows in development right now. And I'm working on one with Zach Whedon, and he wrote a brilliant script that is so ripe and relevant for what's happening today. I can't even. I almost want to call him and go, "Did you look into the future and see what's happening and write this script?" But I'm kind of letting him run with that. It's my show, but I think if it gets picked up and we shoot it, then he would be the showrunner and I would be the EP. And I am learning, like I said, even on season 2 of Creepshow, to kind of not feel like I have to take on every single challenge. But I still walk through the sets every single day, and Amy Holmberg, our production designer, sees me walking through. There was a set we were building the other day, interior lobby of an apartment building, and they were about to install the mailboxes, and I looked up and I was like, "The mailboxes should be on that wall." And they said, "Oh, well, we sent a blueprint, but we flipped the blueprint." It was just like something that they just made an aesthetic choice. And I went, well,
Right.
let's put them over here. And then later, like she sees me walking through the sets every morning, and she said, you know, this is really rare. Like we usually don't have access to the showrunner. Usually the showrunner is locked up in a room writing or with a bunch of writers. But Creepshow's a different animal because we start production with all the scripts already done.
Right.
And at that point, I think we still owed 2 of the 12 scripts. We had still owed 2, but I was prepping to direct the first 2 segments. So I was there just basically taking the boat out of the dock. And I said, yeah, it makes me sad because that's where so much of the creative visualization process is, walking in an empty stage and looking around. Yeah. And then going there 2 days later and there's walls up, and then 2 days later and there's paint on the walls, and then 2 days later there's fake rock, and then 2 days later and being a part of that process of imagining it and watching the people build it, it's so important to be able to be on set and to be. And I think because I have a very clear vision as to what I want, it's even more so. You know, like last season we had Roxanne Benjamin and we had David Bruckner and John Harrison and Savini. And you know, with Bruckner, David directed The Companion and Man in Suitcase. And I thought that, you know, he had come from kind of a low budget world. Same with Roxanne. They had been doing a lot of small independent movies. So this was a complete departure for them because television is a very, very different animal than movies. Because television, you have, you know, a couple, you know, they don't basically come in and say, how long do you need to shoot this scene? They come in and go, you have an hour and a half to shoot this scene. And it's really challenging when you have limited time. You know, I mean, I've been on all of Tarantino's movies. You know, when we shot Kill Bill, it was 8 weeks of just the Crazy 88 scene in Beijing. 8. It was supposed to be 4. But the studio loved the footage so much, they're like, keep going. It looks great. So it's interesting because David Bruckner just directed a movie after Creepshow. And he ran into a friend of mine at a screening and he said, man, I'll tell you, Creepshow really, really prepared me in a very different way to deal with obstacles. Because you're forced to make almost instantaneous creative decisions when you're on set for a television show. And it's not like we had a lot of VFX money to go, don't worry about it, we'll fix it later. You know, while David was shooting scenes in one room, I was in another room shooting all the vines going underneath the door in reverse. Because nobody could really seem to comprehend the reverse action stuff. And I said, guys, I've been doing that shit since 19. And so I said, David, don't worry about those inserts. I'll shoot the inserts. You keep shooting the scenes that you need, and I'll just, you know, so I would set the camera up and I would shoot a test and I'd run over and I'd show it to him. And he's like, you don't have to show. I know you know how to do it.
Let's see, even in that situation.
I want to be respectful. And same with, you know, with Savini's episode, the biggest challenge was, you know, we had to foam carve and create that giant champy carcass, and there was no money for VFX stuff. So I was like, well, we'll just do the wide shots as miniature. So we built a 10 by 10 miniature, and we made a little miniature champy, and we put all the fog and the trees and the sand, and a lot of that stuff was shot on an insert stage in Los Angeles. And the coolest thing about it is people would come up to me and be like, I had no idea that's how you guys do stuff like this. And I said, well, we don't get the opportunity to do it like this very often because everybody just goes, oh, we'll do it digitally. And listen, I'm not
do it in post.
I'm not knocking visual effects because every single project has a very specific tool for it. and visual effects has opened up the world to some unbelievable fantasy material that we would have never, ever been able to do if it hadn't been for CGI. But, you know, I mean, Walking Dead has done a tremendous amount for reminding people how impactful practical makeup effects can be.
Yeah, and let's talk about Walking Dead. You know, we got like 5 minutes, a little over 5 minutes left here in this interview, so I want to hit that right at the tail end. How exciting has this been for you? How can I say this? Kind of moving on essentially from the Skywalker story, the Andrew Lincoln story, and kind of moving into these other characters' stories. And has it been a rebirth of the show? Because the ratings, I'm sorry, the reviews have been incredible. It feels like the show has found its rhythm again, and it's not a negative, but like maybe the story had run its course with the Andrew Lincoln character, and now we want to explore these other characters. Was it kind of a spreading of the wings for you guys to kind of explore even more of this world through different eyes?
Well, it's funny because I don't think anybody really anticipated what the response was going to be once Andy was gone.
Right.
Nobody. There was a lot of question marks floating around,
and rightfully so. He's the lead.
Rightfully so, because he was number one on the call sheet.
Exactly.
I would say that the Whisperer storyline, which to me was one of the strongest storylines in the comic book, did a tremendous amount for rejuvenating the show, because the Whisperers, they give you that sort of Michael Myers faceless demon with a little hint of Leatherface thrown in there. So it's really, you know, to be able to start playing into the horror tropes of characters standing completely still in the nighttime fog. And, you know, this season we did a lot of night shoots, more than we ever have, because we were playing into wanting it to feel much more like a horror show than it ever has. I mean, Walking Dead for there have been scary moments, but it's not a tremendously terrifying show. Right. But when you get a chance to put this new threat into the show, it makes a big difference, because truthfully, you can see a zombie killed so many times and you're like, well, they just run away. Oh, well, we know how to kill them. You know, my big thing always is we got to make sure that the zombies are still a threat, that they're always a threat. Because if you don't see the results of them tearing someone to pieces, then they won't be frightening or scary. Right. And that's critical. So we really did a lot to make sure that the Whisperers were scary and stayed scary. And, you know, between Ryan Hurst and Samantha Morton, Samantha's just a stunning actress. You know, I mean, it's great to see her come back. I directed a lot of her stuff this year. And, you know, we got one episode left, and it's a doozy of an episode. It was written by Corey Reed. I directed it. And I was like, God, just a couple more days, it would have been done. But, you know, I know they released the first couple minutes, I think, online. And, you know, everyone that's seen it is really excited about it. I
know I am. Yeah, I know I am. And, you know, it's been great to kind of walk back into it again and enjoy what's happening again, the world of The Walking Dead. Because like I said, doing that recap show was so much fun. And I felt like, I felt like a season, I kind of dropped off a little bit and then came back once that week, because a friend of mine was like, you got to come back. Trust me on this. I think my friend Roxy Stryer, she's like, you got to come back. It's so damn good. And then I just binged it and tore through it. And now I just love that it's not that it's come back to what it was before. It's that it's found another life to explore and enjoy. And I think that's been the fun part of the show. One last thing I want to ask you before we wrap up, because I know we got to wrap up here. How excited are you for the explosion of the horror genre again now, kind of reminiscent of what we had a little bit in the 80s. It feels that way in the 2010s with all these great directors coming in and doing stuff. Like I mentioned one of your interviews, Alexander Aja. I just saw Crawl. What a fantastic movie.
Oh, I haven't seen Crawl yet. I know. I feel bad.
I know you have time, but
I have time. I'll tell you, I loved Hereditary.
Yes.
And Ari Aster, and it's interesting because a few years, the people that I was inspired by, and then I got into the business, and then there's people coming in the business that were inspired by some of the projects that I was involved in.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're in that next level because Eli Roth and Edgar Wright and all those guys were sort of all inspired by George and Day of the Dead and all that kind. That was my first movie. So now there's a whole new level of filmmakers that are coming in because they were inspired by that next generation of filmmakers. So I'm into it. My 14-year-old daughter loves horror movies. I don't know where she gets it from. So between her and I and my son who's 17, we watched Platform on Netflix the other day.
Oh yeah, the Platform.
I'm getting them into European horror stuff because I think I showed my son Battle Royale when he was like 9 years old, and I said,
love that movie.
If you were in 7th grade, this is what happened to you.
I worked for an executive at one point, and I tried to push him to remake that. And he was like, there's no way they'd ever remake this movie here in America. There's no way it could work. And then I found out a few years ago, New Line was in the process of doing an American remake of Battle Royale with Nicolas Cage. So who knows where, if ever, that happens. But
what were those movies that everybody said?
Basically? Oh, the Hunger Games? You talking Hunger Games? Yeah. They're kind of version, but Battle Royale is way more brutal. Than Hunger Games.
Did you ever see the Hunger Games? I was like, no, I'll just watch Battle Royale. And it told me that the guy who directed Battle Royale directed The Green Slime.
Yeah.
I'm obsessed with The Green Slime. It's the greatest cheesy horror movie, Italian monster movie ever made.
All right, I'll take that one. I'll go watch that one. Absolutely. And The Platform's a great Spanish horror film too. So I'm excited that you loved it. Yeah,
I loved it. I watched Wreck with my son yesterday because he had never seen it. I had seen it at Sitges when it first premiered, and man, it was relentless. I love those. I love that kind of stuff. So.
What about The Train to Busan? Did you ever see that one? Yeah.
Love it. But I saw like 3 years. It's been out for a while.
Yeah, but people are still discovering
now catching on to it now.
Yep. Yeah.
But I had seen it a couple of years ago and thought it was amazing.
Well, there it is. I mean, you guys have listened to an hour of Greg Nicotero talking about so much going on in his world and so much in the world. No, please, you were fantastic. This has been a blast. One of the quickest hours I've ever had interviewing anyone. Greg, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to sit down with me here on the Outlaw Nation on the Deep Cut. Thank you. Creepshow is coming out. Let me get the particulars. I want to make sure I get that right. The date. It is coming out. May 19th, 2020. That's next month. Season 1 will be available on digital HD. We're probably dropping this closer to that release date. So this month of May, it's available May 19th, Season 1 on digital HD and DVD and Blu-ray. Go and enjoy that. Go and watch the original Creepshow as well, for God's sakes. Enjoy the head being buried in the sand and the ocean coming in. All of that stuff that's involved there. And I can't thank Greg enough. Please watch The Walking Dead as well. Anything else you want to plug, Greg, before we say goodbye, my man?
No, just, I'm grateful to the people that support Walking Dead and support Creepshow and love horror. Stay in, man, because it's great stuff.
Yeah, and now's the time to discover it as you're sitting at home alone or self-isolating. There's a lot of horror to discover all over the place. All right. Thank you to Greg Nicotero. We'll talk to you again. I'm hopefully soon on down the road. Good luck with everything else you got going on, Greg. Thanks so much.
Thanks, John. See you, buddy.
Take care, my man.
Bye.
All right, that was Greg Nicotero there on the Deep Cut. What a fantastic hour to just nerd out, geek out with him a little bit, talk horror, talk about all his incredible projects. I know I didn't get as much Walking Dead questions as I wanted to get in there, but hey, you flow with the conversation. That's what an interview is all about, and especially sitting down with Greg is a blast. Hope you all got some great stuff out of this as well. Maybe got re-inspired to explore The Walking Dead if you had kind of dropped off on the seasons before. And also, please go and watch Creepshow. Go and enjoy that. Maybe you sign up for Shudder and watch it ahead of the release of it, but go and buy it if you can when it comes out on May 19th, 2020. All right, I will end the Deep Cut there. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll end the Deep Cut as I end every Deep Cut. Whatever you need to do to get through the next second, next minute, next hour, next day, next week, next month, next year, please find your way to do it. You never know what's waiting for you on the other side, and it just might surprise you. And I love you, and I want to see you back. All right, take care of yourselves. That's the Deep Cut with John Rocha.